Awesome. So very good afternoon to all of you and welcome to this, the very first virtual meetup, I'll say. So till date, we have done a lot of physical meetups in different cities, but starting today, we are also starting up with a lot of virtual sessions along with the physical sessions that we keep on doing, right? So if you are not aware of Systematic, throughout the time that you were waiting, the Systematic community platform QR code was in front of you. So you can always scan this code and it will allow you to register to the platform. So Systematic is the portal that we use for all the community efforts that we have. All right. So let's go ahead and let me speak about what is the topic for today's session. So today we are looking at a very cool and interesting topic. It's of course each one of us someday or other always have this experience of going through an onboarding or an offboarding express, but how Workato as a tool can help the organization to streamline all these onboarding and offboarding processes. So I have a team here, wonderful team. So it's Shriram and Deepak. Both of them are the techies. All of you have Shriram and Deepak in front of you, and just go ahead, bombard them with a lot of questions, and I'm sure they'll be able to answer all the questions that you have. So Shriram works as a technical consultant, and Deepak is also a technical consultant. Sorry, Shriram is a senior technical consultant. So both of them, is a fantastic person. I've already met them in person when we were doing a partner boot camp in Bangalore. And to start with the virtual sessions, there's no better than Shriram and Deepak to go ahead. So hey Shriram, hey Deepak.
Hey, hey
Hey,
everyone.
hey. Now, they have the agenda fixed. So Deepak and Shriram will share the complete agenda of what today's session will look like. But before that, let me allow, maybe 5 minutes, not more than that. I'll share you about what is the Systematic platform all about, what is the community all about. And once this context is set, then I'll pass over the sessions to Shriram, and then Shriram will pass it over to Deepak. Now, before I move ahead to explain what Systematic platform is, let me just go ahead and give a small quick introduction about myself. So I basically lead two programs here at Workato India. One is the Education Partner Program, and the second is the Developer Community Program. So the Developer Community Program is the program that we all are here. The virtual meetup that we're doing is a part of the Developer Community Program. But before I jump upon the Developer Community Program, let me just speak about what is the education program all about. So in Workato, what we try to do is we try to make partnership with the Indian Education Society, especially good universities and colleges. And as a part of the program, we go ahead and introduce Workato as a curriculum to them. So currently we have very few good colleges, VIT, RECs, and a lot of good colleges in partnership with us. And what we try to achieve is students probably studying in the third year or fourth year, they get to understand what Workato is, they'll get to learn what Workato is, and do a lot of hands-on exercises on the tool itself, which means once they're graduated, they are highly employable and they can be deployed into Workato projects, in the upcoming year that they have. Now, let me speak about the developer efforts. So the developer efforts, the efforts is not possible if you do not have the Systematic platform. And in order for the Systematic platform to work, we have created one tool which has each and everything that is needed for you to make sure that you are well versed with what Workato is, and all the questions, concerns that you have would get answered on the Systematic platform. So it's divided into the Pro community, the Systematic community, and the Systematic Plus community. Now, how does this work? Of course, when you are into a community, the benefits that you get is you get to connect with a lot of people around you, and especially with those people who are into the fields itself. For example, you are into Workato, and using the Systematic platform, you will go ahead and connect with the Workato people itself. In that case, you can learn, you can grow your understanding, you can connect with each another, help them understand what you're doing, get a knowledge from them, what projects they are working on. If you guys have any experiences or questions, you guys can share among each another, and all of these will and can happen on the systematic platform itself. Now, as a part of the systematic community effort, there's a lot of programs that we're going to pull up in the coming months. To start with, as I said, we are doing a lot of physical meetups in different cities, and in order to make sure that the city grows up in the efforts, we will go ahead and organize a user group where we will go ahead and allocate one of the person as the regional head for that particular region. For example, we are up and live in Bangalore, Mumbai, Pune, Hyderabad, and depending upon the person who is very much active in the community, your efforts, we will assign you the regional head for that particular city, and you can take over that city and handle most of the meetups on your own. We will support with all the necessity needs that you have, and down the road, just like any other product-based company, we also have a plan to launch the MVP programs. So MVP program is a very reputed program, and this program will make sure that this will take you to the next step in your career. Now, this is how basically the platform is divided into. So you can see there's a lounge over there. It's not that lounge that we always go. It's the systematic lounge that we have. And then we have the pro section and the systematic plus private sections. Now, what's in the lounge section is, there are different categories. So you have the news and announcements. For example, we have an update or we want to post a news, we'll go ahead and post all the news over there. A very interesting section is this jobs board, as we have a lot of partners and customers working with Workato. So when these partners and customers have a requirement or have a developer role opening or any such openings in the Workato field, they go ahead and post the opening over there. So you can always visit the jobs board and you can apply if any of the jobs is suitable for you, right? Make sure your manager and your HR does not see this job board. It's only accessible to you, right? So you have the chat option here where you can chat with your peers and all the members along present in the systematic community. Now, coming on to the pros section, if you are well versed with Stack Overflow, it's some kind of the structure that we have built in. So it's one platform for all. So the forum is also built inside the community platform itself, right? So you don't need to go to a different site for accessing the Workato forum. The forum sits inside the platform itself. So the pros over here, the Automation Institute over here, these are nothing but the forum that we have created. For example, if you have any questions regarding, or any technical questions regarding the Workato application that you're working on or your project that you're working on, you want to ask something, I would suggest you to go to the pro section and drop your questions over there. A lot of people are over there, including me, Workato folks, and other people. As and when people get time, they keep on answering those questions, saying this is the best possible solution that you can go across. So it's been divided into multiple categories. If you are having a questions with Automation Institute, you can post here. If you have a questions with respect to the embedded platform, then also you can go ahead and post here. Now, there's a lot of gamifications on the platform, as you might see, right? Since we call, recipes and all other stuff that we use. So all the gamifications are also built on that platform itself. For example, you keep on achieving batches depending upon the contribution that you do to the platform, right? So our, batches are named as deputy chef, sous chef, executive chef, a very fancy name. Of course, it's a lot of gamifications that we have added. Apart from these batches that you automatically get, we will assess you and we will assign you the regional head and the MVP's title that I just spoke a few minutes before. Just make sure when you are into the platform, under the setting, you make a request that daily I should get the notification and subscriptions to the platform, any updates that happen. And also make sure if you're following the IST time, in the setting itself, go ahead and change your time zone to IST so that the notification or any event that we create, it comes to you at the right correct time zone that I have mentioned over here. Now, apart from the systematic platform, if you want to go ahead and do a lot of learning, we have the Automation Institute, the Academy, or Workato Academy, you can call in that way. So on the Academy, you have a bunch of courses made available free. You can always go to the platform and start learning from there. There's a lot of courses, depending upon your requirement. If you're in the beginner state, if you're in the intermediate state, or if you're in the advanced state, you can always go ahead, choose your learning accordingly, and then you can start working onto it. Currently, there's a lot of certifications there, Pro 1, Pro 2, Pro 3, and a lot of certifications are coming in. Just to name a few, we are working now on a course, which falls into the category of role-based learning. For example, we are currently developing a course called as Integration Developer. It's work in progress. Maybe in a month or so, it will be released to all of you. So taking that course, you will, once you clear the certification, it's a very rigid certification. Once you clear that certification, you will be titled as an integration developer when you clear the certifications. So a lot of things in happening. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. Of course, on the systematic portal, if you want, you can reach out to me. Or one of the convenient way, if you feel, is you can always reach out to me on the LinkedIn platform. Right. So that's all from my side. I'll be here for the entire session. If you have any questions, post your questions into the the chat window. I'll take care of all the questions. And in between, if you have any questions, please follow house rule. Do not interrupt the speaker in between. You can always post a question or raise your hand, and as and when the speaker gets time, they'll assign you to go ahead and speak on behalf of you. And I would request you, if you have questions, maybe in the Q&A section time, unmute yourself and speak, so that we have a live communication. Let's not make it monotonous, where we guys only speak and we don't listen what your feedback is all about. Cool. So that's it from my side. I'll pass it to Sriram and Deepak. Guys, over to you.
Yeah. Thanks, Niaz. Just give me 1 second, guys. I'm just bringing up my screen. Okay, here we go.
Good. Let me know when Sriram, you want to launch me that poll.
Yeah, sounds good. So, yeah, once again, welcome to everyone who has joined this session. Thank you for taking your time. And we want to cover, so this is the first virtual developer meetup we're doing. And the way we want to run this session is a bit different from our standard sessions. We want to focus more on the technical aspects. But because this is the first time we are doing, we're still going to get started with a platform overview. But in the going forward, like it's going to be just discussing the solution, how to go about building it, the solution architecture, etc. So we also will run a quick poll to get the familiarity of Workato from the audience, to know how comfortable you are so far. Like, is there anyone completely new, or if you guys have intermediate understanding, so that we know how fast we need to cover the platform overview. But once that is done, we'll be discussing the employee onboarding and offboarding process itself, where it adds value in the automation chain, and how it can be productive. What are the challenges? We're going to discuss some of the solutions that our customers have implemented. And finally, as part of this developer session, what we have also done is we have taken a very simple use case, an onboarding, offboarding use case, and we're going to build those recipes live on the call. And then, of course, in the end, we can have a Q&A section where we are going to be discussing or taking up any questions you guys have. Throughout this session, like anywhere you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand. And then, like, as in when we switch from one slide to another, like if we'll see which needs to be discussed. But if there are any major discussions that need to happen, we can also discuss it towards the Q&A in the end. Okay, so before we get started, we want to run a quick poll on how familiar you guys are with Workato's features. So if I could request you guys to just take this up, it should be in your, it should have come up in your screen. So we just want to understand, like, if someone is completely new or someone has like good understanding. I see that 6 have already taken the. Okay, 8. So that leaves us 4. So I think we have a mix here: 38%, 22, and 44. Okay, I think that sounds good. So we'll still spend some time in the platform overview, which some of the advanced folks here might already be aware of. But if you guys have any questions on the features and functionality, feel free to put it in the chat and like we can discuss it. But the goal of our getting into the platform overview is to ensure that you guys are aware of Workato's features and capabilities. So yeah, we'll not focus on what, because I think most of you would have already heard what Workato can do. So in this platform overview, we are going to focus on how it's done. So the core of Workato is recipes. That's the building block within Workato. That's how you build workflows. And here we're going to discuss some capabilities of recipes. So a recipe is the workflow that you build within Workato, and it consists of a trigger and a set of actions. A trigger determines what causes this workflow to be executed, and this trigger can come from external applications which you're connecting to in Workato. It can be a scheduled trigger, and even it can be either real time or it can be like polling, which means every now and then Workato polls these external applications to get the data that it needs to execute. And once the trigger has been executed, then a job is created, and which runs the set of actions that you have implemented in the workflow. So the actions control what happens once the trigger is initiated, and what should happen in the sequence of steps. So when you're executing actions, you use something called connectors, which can correspond to different external applications where you want to execute these actions. We also have something called utility connectors, which are used mainly for data orchestration internally. So if you want to do data transformations, if you want to do processing, for that we have some utilities within Workato, and even for that we have connectors. And in terms of logic, like you have the standard branching and linear constructs that you have in programming. So you have for loops, if-else conditions, your try-catch exception handling, etc. And in terms of connectors, these can connect to cloud systems. We also have something called an on-prem agent that allows you to connect to on-premise systems that are not available publicly via HTTP. We also have universal database connectors if certain applications lack APIs and your requirement is to connect to these databases. And we also have something called a connector SDK, which is a Ruby-based framework for you to build your own connectors if it doesn't exist in Workato already. And some key value adds that you get by using the Workato ecosystem is data masking, data retention. So using these two security features, you can ensure that you comply with all of your security compliance requirements, where Workato doesn't retain any data and only acts as a pass-through. We also have your own custom key encryption if you want to bring that in. And we also have auto scaling. So this is completely serverless. So based on how and when you want your workflows to scale, Workato handles that automatically. And in terms of triggers also, we have something called auto dedupe in sequence delivery, where we ensure that everything follows a first in, first out queue. And then we ensure that you have control over the dedupe logic, especially when you're building your own custom connectors to ensure how and when you want to process duplicate records, or if you don't want to. And for these connections, you have to authenticate to it before executing it in the workflows. And that happens through something called connections. So every time you want to use a connector in a recipe, you have to authenticate to it. And the authenticated instance is called a connection. And we support a lot of different authentication options in our connectors, basic, OAuth, header-based, client-based TLS certificate authentication. All of that is supported. Our recommendation, of course, if you're building your own connectors, is to check if OAuth is available and connect to it using OAuth, because that's a more secure way, which ensures that the tokens are not always valid and have their own expiry and refresh mechanisms in place. And one key best practice that we also recommend is not to use personal accounts when authenticating to these connections, and rather setting up specific integration user accounts in these systems with the appropriate roles and permissions as required in the workflows, and connect to it. So yeah, just going over a couple of triggers. We have real-time triggers that's implemented with something called webhooks. So any external event happening in an external application uses the webhooks feature to notify Workato in real time. In fact, we'll see how this is implemented in one of our sample recipes that we built today. But not all applications support the webhook functionality, which is why we have something called polling, where Workato polls external systems for data that has been created or updated in specified intervals of time. The minimum polling interval we support is 5 minutes. So you can set up, even if an application doesn't support webhooks, you can set up polling logic to get data that has been created or updated in the last 5 minutes and create jobs that are processed in Workato. And we also have a schedule trigger where you can schedule a specific recipe to run at a particular point in time. You can specify your own custom cron expressions, etc. And in terms of data dispatch, it can either be single event or it can be processed in batches. It, of course, depends on the connectors you're using, the external API's capability to send data in batches, etc. But if and again, if you're polling, if the API support querying data in batches, so if that is supported, we also allow data dispatch in bulk or batch, which is of course something very used frequently in our ETL, ELT automate integrations. And the key thing we want to call out here is something called a Workato cursor. So when you're processing polling triggers, Workato automatically keeps track of the last processed timestamp of a particular record. So let's assume that you have a workflow that's running and you found some errors and you have temporarily stopped these recipes, and it takes some time to fix. And when you start it back again, even though your polling interval was, let's say, 5 minutes, because you have Workato cursors, it knows that the last process timestamp was probably 2 or 3 hours back and goes and polls for all the records that were created in the last 2 to 3 hours. So this way you're ensuring that there is no data lost, even in between when you are temporarily stopping these workflows to fix some errors, etc. Yeah. And another thing we want to call out is something called trigger conditions. So this, when you set up Workato triggers, you automatically have the context of what is the incoming payload or the context of the data that is coming into the workflow. And this is made possible through something called data pills. So Workato is built on a schema-aware architecture where either it's the triggers or actions, it needs to be aware of the input-output schema. So when you are setting up a trigger, and you have chosen a particular trigger like this, for example, newer and updated opportunity in Salesforce, Workato is aware for that authenticated instance in Salesforce, what is the schema for opportunity, and it presents you with data pills with which you can set up trigger conditions. You can have multiple and/or conditions within the triggers where you can set up how you want or how and when the workflow should execute. So you can control the conditions with which the workflow execution will be limited, and only those jobs will be created for which the trigger conditions are satisfied. And actions, like I said, can change from one connector to another. It's basically API endpoints in the backend corresponding to these actions, and this determines what needs to happen once a trigger is executed. So we have a lot of different actions based on what is supported in these connectors. One thing you'll see common in all connectors is something called a custom action, which means even if there is not a dedicated action present, you can use this custom action feature to set up your own HTTP request. So if, let's say, Salesforce released a new API which is not yet available in the dedicated actions list, you can use the custom action. Sorry, is there a question?
No, I guess someone was on unmute. You can continue.
No worries. So you can use these custom actions to actually set up those HTTP endpoints from scratch. And talking about some utilities, like I said, we have a lot of utilities to help within the workflow building in Workato. So we have file processing, data transformation utilities. We have newer utilities for table storage and file storage, which allows you to set up temporary files in our runtime, temporary tables. We have collections. We have custom code connectors like JavaScript, Python, or Ruby that gives you these runtimes to execute custom code that you need. And we also have data-related utilities like Mapper, common data models, etc. So not be discussing a lot into this, but if you guys have any specific questions on these utilities that we are sharing on the screen currently, feel free to put it in the chat so that we can cover in the Q&A section. But I'm going to take a pause for a minute if someone wants to know more about a particular utility that's listed here or how it's going to be useful. For example, recipe option allows you to manage other recipes in Workato. So you have, it allows you to get the job history, start or stop recipes. So it's just used as an, you can think of it as an administrative recipe that manages other recipes. We have CSV that allows you to parse CSV files and compose CSV files. SQL collections are temporary data stores that's available during the duration of a job run, where you can quickly dump a list of data and then use SQL queries to extract the data sets that you need. Lookup tables are static data sets that you can think of as Excel files within Workato, where you can create a list of columns and store data that can be referenced in recipes. So any kind of mappings or static values that changes that needs to be contextually used in recipes, you can use lookup tables for that.
Yeah, I think Abdul had a question. Abdul?
Sorry? Yeah,
I think Abdul had a question.
Yeah, regarding this SMS by Workato.
Okay.
So this SMS will be provided by the Workato application, because for that, what I understand is the SMS gateway should be there. Some telecom related things should be there, right? How that is issued there?
Got it. So the SMS by Workato utility, actually, we use Twilio in the backend, and it's currently only supported for US numbers. Okay. So we have a built-in integration in our backend that allows you to specify the number, and we use our own Twilio authentication to send these messages. So in fact, you don't have more control over controlling what the sender number is or etc. But if you just want to use this as a utility internally, right, like for your own admins, you have set up a lot of recipes, and if you want to set up something like on a priority one incident, you want Workato to notify via SMS that the recipes are impacted, etc. So you can use that. But if you have more customer facing use cases where in your workflows you want to send SMS messages to end customers who are spread throughout globally, and you have your own specifications or requirements, then it's recommended that you use your own SMS license with your SMS provider. So maybe you're using Twilio or some other provider. You can either see if the connectors for that exist within Workato, or if it doesn't, you can use our universal HTTP connector or build out a custom connector to plug into those API endpoints. This is a utility mainly used for internal notifications. So does that help your question?
If I understand, is what you said is it work only in US then, right?
Yes.
For the US SIMs. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, sounds good. Okay, so let's get into employee onboarding and offboarding. So why do we see a need for automation in employee onboarding and offboarding? So we have, based on all our customers who are currently automating in this particular space, onboarding and offboarding, what we have heard from there, of course, there are a lot of other challenges as well. The main challenges we have heard is, first thing is, it's human intensive. So throughout the onboarding process, right from the time the offer is sent till the time the employee joins on day one, there are a lot of activities that takes place. There's a lot of things that needs to be done: app provisioning, equipment provisioning, the required emails, the required access levels. So all of this is very manual and involves a lot of people, and it's human intensive, and it can take a lot of time to complete these processes. That's one of the biggest challenges faced by companies, especially companies which are scaling up. Scalability becomes a big concern, because if you are a small company with 100 employees and you're taking on an average 2 to 3 hours in doing this human intensive work, that's still fine. But if you are a company that has 100,000 employees spread across the world and you are growing at the same rate, it's very difficult if it is still human intensive and tedious to scale those onboarding processes. So scalability again is another concern, and how they can standardize this across the onboarding till the onboarding, the employee's journey right from the time offer is signed till an employee leaves the company on his last working day. How can the entire process be standardized? That's another challenge. And we have seen compliance as a challenge as well, because when everything is human intensive and manual, there is room for error, there is room for mistakes, and that can impact your compliance. So for example, your new hire is joining and maybe you need to comply with certain laws that a particular person joining with so and so role should not have access to some very high confidential information within your company. But because these are manual processes, it's prone to errors where someone might do a mistake in setting up the right access levels, or at that point in time, the employee might get access to confidential information. So especially that is a huge concern when you are dealing with a lot of employees throughout the spread throughout your company, and that's where compliance is also seen as an issue. And it's you can ensure that those kind of mistakes won't happen when you're automating it or when you're letting predefined processes do it behind the scenes. But the most important of all, of course, is the end user experience, in this case, the employee experience, because throughout this chain, right from onboarding to offboarding, it's the employee's experience that is impacted because of all of these other challenges. And a recent research showed that only 12% of employees throughout the world felt that their companies onboarded them or gave them a good onboarding experience. And that's where we want to solve for it, because that 12% is a very low number. Thinking that if you consider all the employees who are joining in today's world, that's a very low number to who say that they have a very good onboarding process. So that's where we want to improve, and that's where we want to show how Workato can be useful in these processes. So to talk about what our customers are currently automating, right? In the onboarding, we have the pre-onboarding activities that our customers are automating. So this includes everything from the time the offer is signed till everything is ready for them by the time they check in on day one. So that includes like sending the required email notifications, setting up those required swags if they have to be sent, something like that, and app provisioning, equipment provisioning. So what are the right kind of applications they need to have access to when they join? In case they need to have access to equipments like their laptops, specific desk allotted in their workplace. So all of that customers are currently automating. Onboarding checklist. So if there are prerequisites that the employee must complete before joining, like maybe there are links to some courses, links to some documentation that they need to review. So all of that can be automated. Compliance wise, like if they have to ensure that they have filled in certain forms before coming in on day one, so those forms can be automated and sent. Benefits, any, like for example, if they before joining, if they have access to claim buy something and claim those as benefits, those processes can be automated as well. So you can see here that all of these are actually manual activities that have been done traditionally, because from my own personal experience, everything from pre-onboarding and the onboarding checklist, compliance and benefits, all of that previously had happened manually. When I joined Workato, most of these were automated. Like everything, I got links to complete the mandatory courses. I got for benefits, whatever I had to claim, I got those links. The day I joined, all the apps were provisioned. So this is one thing that's not only being automated by our customers, but by Workato as well internally. And there are a lot of other use cases as well that you can automate throughout the onboarding process. These are the most common ones that we have seen. Now, when it comes to offboarding, the same thing needs to happen on the offboarding side as well. So whatever apps were provisioned, whatever equipments that were provisioned, like that can also be automated for deprovisioning. So the customer employees leaving on the last day, you even before that happens, like the termination or the employee leaving the company would have been known a couple of weeks back, or let's say a month back. At that, then itself, you can kick in the right automation processes that can be either scheduled or needs to run immediately to deprovision these required access levels. So final checks, if they need to fill out an exit interview, if they need to give a feedback, all of that is being automated. Reports, if you want to do some kind of audit reporting before they leave, space management, desk deallocation, freeing up space for another employee to join. So all of this is also being done currently. So any questions you guys have in terms of what are the possibilities in terms of onboarding and offboarding automations? Okay. Do you think something is missing that you guys have implemented as part of projects that you have either worked on, or things that you were you saw when you joined a particular company? Okay. Yeah. So what do we see as key benefits of automating? And this is the analysis we have done after our customers have gone live. The first thing, of course, is the time and cost savings. So once you free up a lot of time for your employees, which they were doing manually for the onboarding, and that time can be used for their other productive work. So that there is a lot of time reduced when you automate this process, which also gives higher productivity of the employees. And then with it comes cost savings. So what was required, like for 4 people to do, if there is one automation that's already doing, that's a huge cost savings. And we'll discuss these impacts in the upcoming case studies, where we'll show how our customers are, how they're able to reduce the time, how they were able to reduce costs, etc. And then improved security, of course. So ensuring these automations are doing all the important work, setting up access levels, provisioning access, sending these forms to be completed, etc., ensures that there is no room for human errors. And that's where you also have like a very improved security. And of course, the biggest challenge we had discussed was the employee's experience being impacted. And what the key benefit of automating the entire process is an enhanced employee experience. And that again compounds higher employee retention as well, and improved productivity of the new joining employees. Because if they're joining on day one, and most of these things, what we had to traditionally look for or search for on our first day, what are the things I need to do? How do I go and get the access to these applications? What should I look through, or what should I review before my starting out in my first week, etc.? If all of that was automated and I already had this information available to me, I am more productive the day I join. So that's how we see the enhanced employee experience to impact the entire onboarding, offboarding process. Okay, so now we are going to show some workflows just for you guys to get an idea of how these fits into place within Workato, right? We'll show some sample case studies. You can see the impact here on the right, but I'll focus more on the workflows, how it has been implemented. And in this case, the first is a user story of our customer Broadcom, who wanted to automate or wanted to bring this automation in place mainly because they were expanding with a lot of mergers and acquisitions, and their employee count was growing at a rapid scale. So because of these mergers, and imagine that you are running at 1,000 employees, and then you have a new merger and you want to onboard the company, the resources from the other company that's being merged into, and their strength is somewhere around 3,000. Now, if there were manual processes of onboarding users, 2 to 3 hours spent per day per employee, that's fine, even if it is spread throughout the year. But if you have a 2-week time frame to onboard nearly 3,000 employees and you still are stuck with a manual process, you can imagine how cumbersome or burdensome that can be. So in this case, Broadcom wanted to automate the entire equipment provisioning and access provisioning for all of their employees. And there was a lot of time being spent manually to create these employees in their HR systems, give them the right access level, because there were hundreds of apps being used internally, and to set up all of these, especially if you see here VPN, the metric they were looking at was 2 hours on an average to set up a VPN for a new joiner, because you have to, there's a lot of things that goes in, right from making those, having your DevOps or system admin set up the required profiles and access, to actually sharing those VPN credentials with the employee. So the way they automated this was everything triggered from a new employee being created in Workday. And once an employee was created, Workato's recipes would be triggered for both access provisioning and equipment provisioning. So in the access, a user was created in Okta, which would further control what other applications they would have access to. And in terms of equipment provisioning, a ticket was created in ServiceNow for giving them access to VPN, getting them access to the necessary phones, tablets, getting them a desk assigned, etc. Now, if there can still be some human approvals and notifications that can be there throughout this process, because you can't just automate this entire process without having the necessary approval. So for this, there were some approval mechanisms as well. Customers could request for the employees or managers could request for small updates in the standard tickets that were created, and these would flow back into the recipe, and based on that, like the equipments and access would have been provisioned accordingly. So once Broadcom went live, they saw that the average time to set up a VPN, because automations came in place to set this up, reduced to an average of 7 seconds from 2 hours. Because everything is API behind the scenes, everything is just requests to external systems to set it up, and then an email or however you want to share those VPN credentials to the end employee. So that's the amount of time savings we are looking at, and multiply that with the scale at which they were onboarding employees, and you'll see how much they saved. And they saved nearly 6,500 hours of manual effort per month by automating this entire access provisioning and equipment provisioning in place. See that we have some questions. Okay, on-prem access. Okay, this has been moved to our Q&A list. We'll discuss this in the end. Okay. And the same thing, they offboarded at scale as well. We had the business event, same thing happening in Workday. Their account would get deactivated, which would automatically deactivate the users provisioned in Okta. And there are certain things, certain licenses where you don't want to completely delete it, but you want to transfer. So all of that also has been implemented in Workato, where the necessary applications where the user access should be deleted will be deleted, and the necessary applications where the ownership must be transferred to either the manager or some other owner, that will be done. Now, what Broadcom also needed was an urgent termination request. So this is a standard workflow where someone resigns, or the Workday system is updated with their last working day, and then the process kicks in either on the last working day or when it has to. But sometimes there was a requirement for urgent requests, which required to have a very low turnaround time, and it had to be done immediately. That can be for various reasons, but for that, like again, they created a ServiceNow ticket whenever someone had to be immediately deprovisioned for all the applications, and that ticket would kick in the necessary Workato recipes to deprovision the applications and equipment as necessary. Okay, and now we discuss another. So the previous use case was completely from an onboarding perspective. Everything kicked in at the time the employee was created in Workday. But we have another customer who have automated the process right from the hiring stage to onboarding. So in this case, Slack wanted to impact the end employee experience, and that's the reason they wanted to automate this. And if you see here, once a user was marked as hired in greenhouse, it would directly trigger an automation to where an offer is sent. Now that itself it impacts employee experience positively, because usually we have seen that once a job is confirmed, it takes at least a couple of days or few weeks, maybe sometimes, to get the offer letter. But having an automation in place where once the candidate is marked, an automation immediately sends an offer letter with, after of course the necessary approvals, can like greatly impact the way the employee feels when they get the offer. And once the offer is signed, automatically an employee is created in Workday with a future start date, and the right access provisioning happens, where like a user is created for them in Coupa in case they need to have any kind of claims before joining, and then like a user created in Okta, which will further control what all applications they need to have access to. And the impact was Slack saw a very high increase in their offer acceptance rate once this was implemented. The rollout was also 2x faster, like you can see, and at the same time they saw their offer acceptance rate greatly improve, because there is a reduced risk when you are immediately sending these offers and having these mechanisms in place. Employees or the people are bound to immediately respond to that or accept those offers in such cases. Yeah. And this is another use case, just an automated employee onboarding, where Trax wanted to set up an integration between their Namely and link it to all other applications. And the way this was very useful for Trax was there were a lot. They wanted to automate the access provisioning, or especially the update and access when a particular user's role is changed. Now, Namely is the single point of truth on the person's data, individual data, and the kind of role that they are having, but everything else is controlled through Okta. And the main issue they were facing was if anyone's user's role is updated or a region is changed, they had to manually control in Okta what applications they need to have access to, or how these access level changes. And what they did was that they set up a Namely connector, which can look out for any new events or updated events, especially if someone's role is updated, and correspondingly update their access level in Okta, which will further control how their other apps are impacted. And this is another customer, FreeNow, where they fully automated the onboarding and offboarding at scale. You can they were using Workday as their HRS system, and if you see here, they had more of a scheduled process where a report which runs frequently, maybe once a day, gets all the new hires and terminated employees, and based on that, it kicks in the appropriate onboarding or offboarding flows. So this is one way to imagine how different. So most of the cases that we are seeing have a similar use case where everything triggers from an HRMS system and everything is linked to either provisioning or deprovisioning apps. But the way it is being implemented in Workato is different. Some have real-time events, some have ServiceNow tickets, some have scheduled processes. So that's how like you can control how you want it to be. So it's not like a one-fits-all approach. Using the connectors, you can decide how you want to orchestrate these solutions. So here, the report is fetched from Workday, and then accordingly, like their apps are provisioned or deprovisioned, like their user is created or deleted in Jira, and then their user is created in Google Suite and Active Directory, which will, and once all of this is done, when employee receives their devices, they're asked to enroll in Okta, which has, once that is done, there is just-in-time provisioning that kicks in for all the necessary applications that they need to have access to. And FreeNow saw like a lot of cost reduction because they had a lot of automations in place, which greatly reduced the manual work, because there were hundreds of applications being implemented or used by users, and there were a lot of touch points, manual touch points, that were completely eliminated. Before going into the sample solution overview, I'm just going to take a pause. Deepu, I see that you're already responding. Is there any question that we need to discuss now? Since onboarding is...
Oh, sorry, I'm on mute. Yeah, so I think there was a couple of questions asked by Sukumar.
Okay.
So one was related to on-prem access is done using agent mechanism for Okta or Jira or any other on-prem access here.
On-prem access is done using...
I think in that particular scenario where we were talking about, the connections were made through the on-prem agents to the on-prem applications.
Yes. So the way it works is, Sukumar, let's assume that API, even before API, the on-prem is before the API. It's the network layer where it comes in. So what happens is, if you're connecting to cloud, you just need a connector which can connect to the API. But when it's an on-prem agent, which is not at all connected through the HTTP, what we have a on-prem agent software that needs to be installed in the virtual machine or the on-prem agent where these applications are running. It can be any application. It doesn't matter whether it's Jira, whether it is some other database, whatever is being hosted in that virtual machine. Once the on-prem agent is installed in that system, there is a TLS WebSocket channel that is initiated where Workato's cloud and the on-prem agent establish a channel. And because the on-prem machines or virtual machines don't allow inbound connections, this connection is actually initiated outbound from the agent that was installed in the virtual machine. So what this agent does is it creates an outbound request to Workato's gateway and opens up a channel. And this channel can be used for bidirectional communication. Now, there are a lot of applications internally. It can be Okta, it can be a database, it can be access to files. You set up something called an on-prem profile where you say, after the agent has been connected and once Workato is able to communicate to that machine, these are the credentials that you need to use to maybe access an on-premise API or an on-premise application, or if you want to access a local file directory, this is the credentials that you need to use. So on-prem agent is basically at the network layer, and after that you have these applications which will still need to be authenticated. So you can think of OPA as something that comes on top of a connector whenever it needs to be authenticated.
Yeah, I think there was another question that was related to Broadcom use case, where we talked about the approvals being sent.
Yes.
And why are we using Gmail? Instead, we could have used MS Teams or Slacks to get the approval.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. That in fact, we do have a lot of customers who are using bots. Internally, we within Workato also use Slack bots for any access level change or a new application access request. In this case, Broadcom had a requirement to do it that way. Like maybe there were they wanted to have a email chain, and for their audit and compliance purpose, it is required that way. That's why they used Gmail, but definitely it can be automated using workbots. We have workbots for both Slack and Teams, where it allows you to easily set up a bot with all the kind of forms or approvals or buttons that you need to have this in place. Okay, I think that covers it. All right.
So Kumar, does that answer your question? We good? Okay. So I think we can jump on to the demo now.
Yeah. So before we jump, so what we have done is for today's session, so of course we discussed a lot of solutions, but we also want to show how we go about building it, especially for someone who's completely new to Workato. They can get a good understanding of the terminology or the basic platform overview features we discussed. So we have taken up this simple use case where for onboarding, we are going to be setting up a trigger where a candidate is marked as hired in greenhouse. And that is going to trigger a recipe, a Workato recipe through webhook. And once that webhook is triggered, we are going to do these app provisioning actions where we are going to create a user for them in Jira. We're going to create an employee in Bamboo HR. We're going to provision a user for them in Okta as well. And of course, this can be expanded. There can be a lot of approvals in place. There can be, for example, if someone needs to, you need to refer based on the role being hired, what is the kind of access request that needs to go in. So all of that can be done. But in the interest of time, we are just going to focus on the main use case. And for offboarding, similarly, when an employee is terminated in Bamboo HR, that event is going to be received in Workato, and we're going to deprovision the user in Okta. We're not going to be doing deleting the user in Jira or deleting the employee in Bamboo HR, because from a compliance perspective, you're still required to have them. So once you deprovision them in Okta, immediately they lose access to all the applications. So this is a sample flow that Deepu is now going to show in Workato. And if you have any questions, you can continue to put it in the chat, and then we can also discuss it in the Q&A session in the end.
Okay, thank you. Let's get started. I'll start sharing my screen. Let me know if it's too small to view. I sort of tend to keep it to a very minimum, like short images. Okay, so before I start off the actual development, I just wanted to let you know there are certain good best practices that are to be followed as a developer or a consultant when you are developing something. It could be any platform for that matter, but at Workato, we recommend this to have the project structure, and within a project, you use folders to define what the project is all about and which use case, as well as this will come in handy not just to have good looking UI, but also it will help you in role-based access systems, access controls that you will set up. And maybe you have a dedicated team who does the monitoring, and you want to give them only the view access and not the edit access, or you want to give them access to only the HR use cases and not the other use cases or other projects, right? So if you want to set up such granular level role-based access, then it would be helpful when you set up the folder structure in this way, the way I have formatted. I've pre-formatted it, so it starts with the project here, and then I'm going with the first use case. Within that, I have structure for the main recipes where they would lie, and then I have a folder for connections. Now, I may not want to keep this inside here and have, set up a shared connection which everybody else access. Then I can simply move it out here to the home assets, right? So necessarily, this is about housekeeping, how good we want to keep it, and how clean we want to maintain it, and to what level we want to expose the data. When I say data, it's the assets within Workato, right? Recipes and lookup tables and connections and all of that. So for our use case, as we were talking about onboarding and offboarding, I'd like to sort of take a reverse approach to our use case. I don't want to start with the trigger as is, but instead, as we know that our trigger is going to be for onboarding is going to come from Greenhouse, where someone is hired. I want to look at what am I going to do once that happens. So my approach is that I'll start with individual actions or individual activity that needs to take place. For example, creating user in 3 different systems. There are multiple ways you can do it. I would personally prefer to create 1 recipe per user access, right? So that you have control over what are the different inputs that you can feed to that particular application related accesses, right? So I'm going to create something called as a recipe function, which were called as callable recipes in the past. If you've been using it for a very long time, if you're new, then you would still be accustomed with something called as a recipe function. Now we also follow some naming conventions, like you can give a project code for any project that you're working on in this case, and then I call it a recipe because it's a recipe, or if it's a function, then maybe I'll call it as function, right? And then I'll give it a name. So let's consider that I'm going to create a user in Jira. So I'm going to call it as create Jira user, right? And I'll start off with this.
Hey, Deepak, if you can maximize your Zoom window and probably zoom in a bit.
Do you want me to? Okay.
Yeah.
No, so this is a bigger screen. Like, is this better?
A little better, yes. Maybe you can go. Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. It looks like magnified to me. Like, yeah. Okay. So, but yeah, thanks for calling out. So, a recipe function is a recipe, but this is something that you can call in. Maybe in programming languages, you have libraries where you have call certain functions to happen, right? Similar to that, you can build the functions here. This is different from the actual recipes in case where you are on a recipe-based billing and if it's a recipe with a trigger where it's triggered from an external app or a webhook, then it becomes a billable recipe to you. Now, if you build a function, then this becomes non-billable. However, the tasks inside it are considered to be billable, right? Like, it goes towards your overall task consumption. Now, it has two options. One is the input and the other one is the output, similar to any other activity that you do. So I'm going to define what my input is. I need, let's say, very basic as a first name, right? And then I will need a last name. A very important factor is, what do I use to make this person's record unique in any system? Since this is Jira that I'm talking about, I'll most likely use an email, right? The work email as is. So that would be my unique identifier. Now, I know that this is a new hire, so I'm not going to add additional step here to check the Jira system to see if the user exists or not, and then create a user. But instead, I'm going ahead with creating a new user in Jira directly, right? So I'm going to create user. So this is my connection. I have pre-built the connections just for this purpose. And then I'm going to use the email. In the display name, I'm going to use the first name, space, the last name. Right, this is all my Jira instance needs me to provide. The password will be auto-generated, and an invite link will be sent to the end user once I do it, right? So, and in this case, I'm not returning any results because I'm not going to consume the Jira ID to be stored anywhere else, right? If you're doing app-to-app integration, and if you want to set up bidirectional sync, that's when you will look to return some data after taking certain action in the functions that you call, so that you can make use of it. But in this case, there is no need, so I'm not sending anything back to the parent recipe that's going to call this function. I'm going to delete it. So it's just a simple step. Now, if you know predefined errors that you're going to get, you can put them here and say that, okay, if there are timeouts, then go ahead and reprocess it maybe 3 times at an interval of 10 seconds. This is something that I started doing like years ago, and I still follow it. And I'll simply say that contains timeout, right? Then I would repeat it. Else, I would simply stop the job with error so that it returns that error message to the parent. So that's my first function that is ready to be tested. Now, as any developer would do, you would go ahead and do a unit test and make sure that your recipe functions as it's expected. So I'm going to do a test recipe. So this is the best part, right? Initially, when I started developing on Workato, we didn't have this option of testing the callable recipes. We used to trigger it from another recipe, like a parent recipe, and send the data from there. But in here, right now, I think this came into picture maybe a year ago or so, where maybe less than that, where you have an option to add the trigger data within the function itself and test the build that you have done. So I'm going to say demo web .com. Let's see if it goes through. Here you go. So my user was created with so-and-so email address. So that's it. So now I know that I've done my unit testing. This is a simple one. So I just tested it and it's all good. I'm going to exit out of this and say, start with the recipe, keep it ready for the parent. I see that we only have like 15 minutes left. So I'm going to create one more function similar to this, and then I'm going to jump to the main recipe. So build a recipe function, similar naming convention. And then I'll call it as create user in create user, maybe Bamboo HR, right? Or maybe Octal for that matter. We can try both of them. So in this case, I'm not going to add the error handler block because we talked about it. So I'm directly going to say, give me Okta, and then create the user. I get to select the predefined connection. I've already set it up. So, and in here, I'll use, let's say, the same fields. So there's a shortcut to this as well. Now, once you add a random field, you can go back to the other recipe that you created, do this edit schema, copy everything that's there, and then put it here and save it. So that way you can save some time when you have large subsets of, or you can even clone that function and simply use it, right? And say last name, then the email. Okay. So most of you, as I could see in the poll, that you have been using WorkAuto for some time, so you know how these intelligent AI activated suggestion works and recommendation works. So it tries to read from your previous steps and try to give you the best suggestions, which you can map, or else you can drag and drop from here, right? You can also copy the pill that's in the other step and paste it. I don't want to give the rest of the thing, so I'm simply going to say, show me whatever is here. This is just housekeeping, right?
Hey, sorry to interrupt. It looks like your Mac is really low on charge. Can you plug your charger in?
Oh, yeah. Let me do that. Okay. I'm going to say activate this user. Give me a quick minute. Let me grab my charger.
And this is just a basic workflow we are showing, but typically what we see here is corresponding to a function call. Whenever an employee has been created and we need to provision a user in Okta, it's not straightforward, right? Because you need a lot of context on what kind of access levels he needs to be created, what role, because when you create a user in Okta, you need to specify what role or what department he is. So because with that, it will control what kind of applications he need to have access to. So usually we see people hosting that kind of information either in a separate database or a Google Sheet or something. So ideally, it would look something like when a new employee is coming in, we take the designation there for which they're being hired. And then we look up some other, it can be a Google Sheet or an external database where we see where it's maintaining the corresponding Okta user mapping. So if someone is being hired as a manager, then what's their corresponding user role in Okta, which will then control which kind of apps they need to have access to. So that kind of intermediary logic to get the mappings and pass the data accordingly will be required. But yeah, because we are short on time, we are just showing some simple workflows. But if you guys have any questions on such kind of how we would go about solutioning that, because you can use lookup tables, you can use Google Sheets, you can use our table storage. So there is a lot of different recommendations on based where you want to get the data from and how you need to do transformations. So we can discuss that as well in the end.
Right. So it's the same kind of test. So thanks, Sri, for that input there. I'm going to say demo web again, use the same email. To test, make sure it works. And my Okta user is created and the status shows as provisioned. Now there is a difference. Now you might at times do not want to activate the user straight away as soon as they are hired, but maybe after they sign their offer DocuSign document and then you want to activate them, or maybe you are waiting for some approval, but you're keeping the user profile ready in Okta. Once the approval goes through, you'll then provision the user, right? Activate the user. That will kick off another whole subset of automation within Okta to provision the applications. Okta has workloads where you will set it up so that it's not managed in the middleware layer or an automation platform layer, but instead within Okta itself. That would be the best practice I would suggest anybody for app provisioning, because Okta has, if you use Okta. If you're not using Okta or some other provider, then maybe dependent on what you're using, like if it's something from AWS or Microsoft Azure, then the process would change. Right, so I'm going to start this. Now that I have created my functions, right, and they are here, ready to be accessed, I'll go to my main recipe. I have pre-built them because I had to set up the webhook in Greenhouse. I have pre-drilled them, but I can quickly walk you through. I know we are almost at time here. We only have like 8 minutes left. We will discuss, maybe we'll have a follow-up session for offboarding and a much complex use case for offboarding. But for today's session, we will talk about, so how do you set up webhooks? So the moment you give the event name here, it generates a webhook URL, which you copy and go to your Greenhouse to set up your webhooks, right? It would be under the integrations tab in Greenhouse. I just documented it there. And then the moment I hire someone, that event is posted to this recipe, right? And when you set it up for the first time, you have an option for the guided setup. You can reinitiate the guided setup in some cases, right? But this is one time. And what I've done is I've went through the guided setup and it automatically cached all that Greenhouse has to offer. And I'm not creating or defining this schema here manually. All of this is auto-generated, right? Now I have my webhook set up already. All I have to do is when I receive this event, I have to go ahead and configure the applications, right? So I'm going to say, use the functions by Workato. I can do synchronous or asynchronous, depending on your use case. You can define, okay, create the user in Bamboo HR only after it's provisioned in Okta, or you first create, regardless whatever happens, you create it in both the systems, right? In my case, I'll say whatever happens to the other system, I don't care. I just want it to be sent to both the applications. Then I would say, okay, go ahead and create this, right? And I'm getting the first name here, the last name here, and the email from multiple sources of email, right? So application created to candidate recruiter email and users test value email, custom fields, right? So I may want to use a email that's related to the applicant itself, as in the candidate itself, right? This candidate may have multiple email addresses. In this use case, for this perspective, I'm going to pick up the very first one in the list of email addresses. I'm hypothetically imagining the situation that the very first email listed in the list is this actual email, which holds to be true in most of the cases, right? You first enter your primary email and then the secondary ones. So that's what I'm doing. And then if you ever come across the situation, right, where you have to pick up maybe the second one, then you might have to use the formula more and say, in the email addresses, plug the second item. That's another possibility. But if you do this, it will always pick up the first one in the list. So that's done, right? Now, what I can do, I can go ahead and add one more step and do it, or I'll be smarter to simply copy it and paste it. Now, you can copy and paste across recipes as well, as long as they are in the same workspace. If it's in a different workspace or a different environment, you cannot copy paste. Now, for those who are not aware of environments, these are dev, test, and prod. Like you can have 3 different environments in Workato as well. But what you can also have is multiple workspaces. That's how we used to do things in the past. Now there is an option to have multiple environments in one single workspace, which makes it much easier to manage across workspace when it comes to administration of Workato itself. This is what I'm referring to. If I were to go to my workspace, right, I can quickly show you how the environments look like dev, test, and production. And this is workspace shifting from one workspace to another. So here I am, and I have all my functions created for the onboarding. Both of them are up and running. And in my main recipe, I have configured my application to receive the data from Greenhouse and send it across to both the functions, which we have already tested. So I'm going to quickly start this. And in case of errors, I'm saying stop the job with error as well. Along with that, notify me via email. You can replace this with either MS Teams or Slack or any other way of messaging you. For example, creating a ticket in Jira Service Desk or Zendesk or Salesforce, whichever way you want to manage it. But it's always good to have that you have some way of notifying your operations team that something went wrong with one of the jobs. So I'm going to start this. And then I'm going to take one of my test applicants here. Just say, I'll move them to offer real quick. What happened? Yeah, manage offer, request approval. And then mark as approved. So I went through the approval within Greenhouse. Now I'm going to mark this candidate as hired. I can say new headcount, make candidate private no, don't keep this job open anymore. I can also send emails to a specific set of people when it was hired. That's the inbuilt feature of Greenhouse, but I don't want to do that. And say save. So this person is hired now, and our recipe here should receive an event very shortly. Let's see. Wow, we're almost at time. There you go. So Gluku1 with this email was received. Interesting thing that I would like to say here is this is another housekeeping job that we would do as developers, is that make lives of the ones who monitor the recipes easy, right? So there's an option that you can customize this job page, right? And you can capture important information that will help you debug or troubleshoot issues when they come up. If you want to say how many times this guy's record came through, or I want to locate it in between thousands of jobs that got processed in the same day, it's easy for me to search here and find it rather than trying to look through the jobs pages and pages together. So yeah, so that's about the demo, and you can see that it called asynchronously both the recipes, and they ended up creating respective records in both the systems, right? You don't have to go to individual recipes to view the job. This is a shortcut. The moment you go to the step, you can go ahead and click on view job, and you'll be able to see all that happened. So my Jira failed because there was too many requests, right? So this one's dropped with some error. Why didn't it trigger an email to me here? Can somebody answer? Except Sukumar.
Because you made those function as synchronous, so it's not wait for your response back from the function scope.
Yeah, great. That's right, Shiva. Thanks for saying that. Yeah, since I made it asynchronous, the job did not actually, this parent job did not actually wait for the job to be completed in the child, and this particular failure went missing. However, I still have it failed in the child. I can still monitor it, but I was unable to create any ticket or real-time notification to my operations team. That's what happened here. So, yep, there we go. So that's about the onboarding, right? And this is more to talk about how we can quickly create a recipe and scale. Now, a lot of work, if you ask me as a developer, goes into designing what you want to build versus how you build it, right? Or the actual build itself. If you design your automations, if you architect it well, your building time will be very low. So yeah, so with that, I want to rest here. Due to time constraints, I really cannot go into the offboarding workflows, but it will be pretty much similar. Things to note is that your project structure, the way you organize it, that makes your life easy to locate assets when they are needed. And also it helps in recipe lifecycle management when you want to export it from one environment to another one and deploy it. So here we are. Thank you, everyone.
Right.
Hey,
Cool,
hello
cool.
to Lias.
Hey, thanks. Thanks, Deepak, for that wonderful demo. And thanks, Shriram. Before we just go ahead and close this session, I just have few questions for all of you. It will come via poll. Deepak, if you let me allow share screen. Yeah, thank you so much. So before I pull those questions in front of you, this is what the systematic platform tool is all about. And on the navigation bar, you will see you will have a regional user groups section. So over there, you can of course go to the section that you are in. I'm assuming most of us are from Asia here itself. You'll go to Asia, and at present, as I said, we have Bangalore, Pune, Mumbai, and Hyderabad user group. Make sure you enroll into your user groups if you are from Bangalore, closest to you, or if you want a new user group to be created for your particular city, please reach back to me, and we can get that done for you, right? So that's all. Let me just put a quick questions in front of you. Let me just go ahead and do that. Just give me a second, and post that we'll go ahead and stop the session. So just a feedback questions, people. I want all of you to please go ahead and take this survey, or the feedback questions. So I guess more or less there would be around 6 questions, and all the questions are in front of your screen. So please go ahead and choose the answer correctly, or if you need to go ahead type your own answers, you have also options to do that. So we'll wait for a couple of minutes. Let's all the participants, submit the feedback, and then we'll close the session. And if in case you have any questions or if you want to know more about the community efforts, you can always reach out to me. I guess all of you should have my email address because that's where all the Zoom request and the systematic request might have come across to you. So if not, it's niyaz.ahmed@verkato.com. And I'm always available on LinkedIn. You can always go ahead, ping me on LinkedIn if you have any queries, or if you want to go ahead and organize a developer meetup, in your organization or in your particular city, we are always open to do that. We can talk more about it, and we can have the next meetup, in your organizations. Ideally, we go ahead and try to do most of the developer meetup in a partner ecospace. If not, then we, invite the other community around, and then we have our meetup done in that particular city. So I've got few people have already submitted the feedback. I want the remaining also to please submit the feedback, because this is, as I said, it's the first virtual meetup that we're doing. And this is kind of a learning for us, so that we could learn more. And in the future, all the new virtual meetups or new topics that we come up, we can improve on ourselves, for all the learnings that you have shared with us. Cool. Another 90 seconds and we'll close the session. I know we are, due 5-6 minutes. People, who have already submitted the feedback, feel free to drop if you have another call or work, in hand. But other people who haven't completed it, I request you to please go ahead, complete that, and then you can drop off the call. So there's a particular question over there, a specific topic that you would need to address in the upcoming future virtual meetup. Please make sure you fill in all the topics that you or your organization are interested in. So we'll consider those topics, and the next coming series of virtual meetup we'll pick those topics and we'll get those sessions done. Okay, last 30 seconds, people. Done. So I guess all of the people in the call have answered it. So that's all from our side, people. And make sure that you follow the systematic page very well, because all the updates are up and live on the systematic page. As I said, any events that we organize will get launched on the systematic page. Any updates or any feature or any product release that we do from our site, we make sure that we put it on the systematic page, so that everyone who follows the systematic community are aware of what is done over there, right? So be active in the community. If you want to organize a lot of sessions, if you want to host any of these sessions, we can do that. So get in touch, and let's grow the community together, right? So that's all from my side, people. Thank you all. Take care. Bye-bye.